Good morning. I'm Pippa Wilson from Barrington James. I'm talking today with Dr. Yin Ho regarding her new book. Good morning, Ing. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Pippa. So
Good to
nice
see
to
you.
good to see you. Good to be able to chat about the book. It's been a while, so it's
It
great
has
for
too
inviting
long.
me.
Yeah, lovely to see you. Thank you. So I'm aware that for the past 18 months or so, you had been writing your book, and I've been watching your book events and your launches happening. And I'm excited that you're going to be joining us at the Barrington James booth at ISPOR in May. So thanks for that. But I wanted to talk with you today just to find out obviously more about your book, your inspirations, how it's been going so far. So, should we just start off with you giving us an overview of Rushing Headlong, and we can find out more?
Absolutely. So, thank you. So, yes, I took 18 months off to write this book, and I've spent the last several months promoting the book. But the book is, it's called Rushing Headlong: Health IT's Legacy and the Road to Responsible AI. And in a moment, I'll grab it and sort of do a little visual aid. But
Right.
um, the book itself is actually a little history lesson, or should I say, it's a historical overview. It goes back to about the 1990s. It speaks a little bit about a time before that, but it tells the story of how health information technology came about and in the United States, how we
Uh-huh.
ended up with the infrastructure that we did, and in many ways, what that actually means if we want to think about meeting the age of AI and sort of the what does it mean to deal with the responsible AI. Um, a large part of what has happened in health IT is not necessarily well known. People who've been in it will recognize it, will recognize very much all the different events that occurred, all the policy decisions, all the different companies that came out. But the overall story of how we ended up with such a fragmented system, how we ended up with systems that didn't talk to each other or still don't talk to each other, and at the same time, dealing with the fact that research and clinical care are still separated so far. This is kind of is the story that tells you about that. And then more importantly, because of all of these different things that have happened, it changes also the quality of the data that exists in health IT. And that's actually a danger if you just apply AI directly to it. So I wanted to use this as an opportunity to sort of explain how do you sort of think about AI in a world that has basically had 30 years of a history where IT decisions haven't necessarily been made with
Mm,
any respect to the quality of the data.
amazing. Very interesting topic. When did you first start thinking about putting all this into a book and publishing?
So it's interesting. I probably would never have written a book had it not been for the fact that it was around June of 2024 when I started working on this book, and a
Yeah.
large part of it came from this sense that generative AI was arriving just as at the moment where the consequences of all of the different design and problems were no longer going to be impossible to ignore. And I really felt compelled to basically write this book because I knew that AI was moving very fast. I had
Mm,
been the interim CEO of Veradigm, and I had bought
yeah.
a generative AI company. And I had bought a generative AI company that built small language models at the time, largely because I wanted to sort of develop the perspective of how do we start to use models internally in a way to sort of improve the quality of the data that we have so that it would be useful for research. But once I stepped out of that position, I also realized that the race around AI sort of like climbing so quickly, everybody pushing it so hard, that
Mm,
that sensibility might not be there. And the reason it wouldn't necessarily be there is because most people didn't know the history of how we got there. And so
exactly.
I felt really the need to say, okay, everyone, let's take a step back and take a look at what did we do? How good is that data? And can you really truly just plug it straight into a model? You probably can't. And this is why. But that doesn't mean you can't use AI going forward. It just means you have to be aware of where we came from in order to know how to go forward.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks for that. You did mention in the book about the policy decisions distorting the marketplace. Can you just expand a little bit more on that?
Sure, happy to. So one of the things, and most physicians, and anyone who's been in clinical care over the last, at least last 20 years would know this, but most people might not. which is that for the longest time, electronic health records, and I'm going to focus on electronic health records because they really
Okay.
are the backbone of health IT, or what we think of as the health information technology infrastructure. They were originally designed as electronic medical records in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and they were designed originally by physicians for physicians.
Mhm.
The concept at the time was we need to put all the information about a patient in one place, and then
Yeah.
further on into the 90s, it became, oh, well, we need to make sure that if someone gets treated in one state, they will still be able to port their or be able to access their records in another state. That was
Sure.
really the original thinking around it. And I think everyone was in agreement. But the problem with it was technology was clunky back then, it was expensive to install, and for most independent physicians, it just was too cost prohibitive to actually install it inside their systems, not when paper was just so readily available. And so adoption really remained very low for a long time. And it didn't matter that we had electronic prescribing networks. It didn't matter that there were a lot of other networks that were starting to develop, or even that we had mobile technology, other things were starting to come out. We just couldn't quite get the adoption rate of electronic records up very high, beyond about 20%. And then in 2009, comes a policy decision that really changes everything. Everyone remembers in 2008, the global economy kind of crashed based on the housing market. And when that occurred, we ended up passing in the United States a series of recovery bills and reinvestment bills because it was just to get the economy going again. But it's tucked inside one of those reinvestment or sort of recovery bills um,
Mhm.
was this act called the HITECH Act, and the HITECH Act was actually put in there to try and spur on electronic health record adoption. And the
Mm.
way it was done was it basically said to every physician and every hospital, you must adopt an electronic health record, a certified electronic health record, certified by the US government. And if you don't, we will penalize you. So, first, we'll pay for the installation costs. So, you can't complain that you don't have the money to be able to install the systems. We'll give you that money. But on the other side, we'll also penalize you. If you don't adopt, we're going to take 1% of your Medicare or Medicaid dollars for every single year for the next 5 years, up to 5% until you adopt it. And so when you put that kind of a big stick in the game and
Yeah.
then you also take in the cost of it, you can only imagine it
Yeah.
worked, right? So 20% adoption suddenly shoots up to about 80, 90%, right? Everybody jumps into the game and steps in, and because they know they're going to get penalized. And that's basically
Yeah.
what's happening. And while maybe everyone would say, oh, that's a great policy success, what was an unintended consequence from that policy success, if you want to think of it that way, is that it divorced the physician from the buying decision,
Mm.
meaning that all
Mhm.
of a sudden the vendors who were creating electronic health records didn't have to actually think about their physician, how they worked, their preferences, or anything
Yeah.
else. All they had to do was basically please the people who were paying the bill. And that was basically the government and a payer sort of system. And so, needless to say, then the preferences no longer mattered. And this is the only industry where the software does not have to actually meet the demands of the users, which, if you think about it, is kind of outrageous because
Mm.
um,
Mm.
if I design something and you don't like it, you're not going to use it. You're not going to buy it. But what if you're
Yeah.
compelled? You've been forced to buy it and you have to deal with whatever design I have. Doesn't that just sort of create a real problem in the long run, not only for the way you feel and about your own sort of agency and your own ability to do anything, but it
Uh-huh.
also sort of makes this market get really distorted because now nobody is buying because it's a better product. People are buying
Yeah.
because they're required to buy it.
Exactly.
When that happened, you basically ended up with a system, a health information technology system, or EHRs, that were designed for billing. All of the activity that happens in an electronic health record, even if you're capturing the notes of a observation, it really is a bunch of drop down menus, a bunch of sort of check boxes, and a large part of it is that you're asking a physician to pre-write or pre-code a bill that will end up being sent off. So the entire thing is designed to support billing.
Yeah.
And because of that, a lot of clinical truth disappeared or it got buried, right? Like you weren't going to look for all these notes on stuff because all you cared about was, did something get done? When did it get done?
Yeah.
Then making sure that it got charged and made sure that they got paid for. And for that reason, it actually corrupted the data going forward all the way for the next 15 years. And so that's really the example of what actually happened. This one policy decision increased in an unnatural way and in a market distorted way adoption. So now you have it everywhere, but now it's designed in a direction that only supports billing. And there wasn't really a thought process of what it actually would take away from physicians and
Yeah.
patients. And at the same
Patience. Yeah.
make it harder for clinical research. In fact, the entire industry of real world data comes from the fact that you
Yeah.
actually have to convert the data that comes out of a billing system, these
Mhm.
claims, into something useful enough for research. So now we spend more money to convert the data into something that you can use to analyze simply because the way it comes out is like a set of receipts. It's like I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out what happened to you by looking at all your receipts, or I'm trying to figure out what your shopping patterns are based on your receipts. And that's
Yes.
really kind of the position we're in. So that's one of the reasons why there's a warning sign. You can't slip AI onto that because what are you going to do? You're not going to end up finding more clinical truth. You're
Yes.
only just going to accelerate the billing game.
Yeah. What part do you think the physicians and patients could play in responsible AI?
I mean, a large part of it is they have to exercise their voice. And this is one of the things that I think has not been really as embraced. I think physicians, I've been when I've been on book tour, I've talked to lots of physicians and lots of physician groups
Uh-huh.
even at medical schools. And what I've come across is this sort of resignation that they've been beaten down by the system, right? This is just the way it is. You know, you can't fight it. Their chief medical officers aren't fighting for them. It's really just another tool that they have to accept.
Uh-huh.
Every new technology is another thing that they might work out the government governance around it. They might work out sort of usage around it, but for the most part, they're compelled to use. And if you think about it, it's really dangerous because
Yeah.
every time the physician's medical license is getting stretched further and further and further, right? They're sort of saying that I use this tool, but I have to sign off on the result, and if I'm liable for whatever comes out of it. So if a note gets generated by an AI, I have to read it and correct it. And if I don't read it and correct it and I make a mistake, I am still liable because I had to sign off on that note. So
That's
in some ways,
terrifying.
stretched the liability of these physicians and really compelled them to use these tools. So when I talk to physicians, a lot of times they're kind of like, yeah, but what else can we do? And, in some sense, they face an interesting situation. On the one hand, they are more and more physicians are employees, meaning they're employed by hospitals, they're employed by
Yes.
these health systems, and so when you're an employee, you don't usually have a say in the operating system that is running the organization. You just don't, right? It's kind of like
Um,
saying, "I'm coming into a new company. I'm a Mac user, but
yeah.
you're a
Gonna
PC
change
user.
everything.
I'm gonna have to change it over, right? I don't get a choice." So there's a little bit of that happens.
Okay.
um, but then that also means that they feel like they can't explain the insidiousness that exists within the system and how it's changing them, and they can't really fight it. How do you fight that? Because the health system has spent billions of dollars and multiple years installing something, and you suck it up. That's kind of what ends up occurring, and it makes physicians feel like there's not a lot they can do about it. They can complain about certain things. They can say, "Hey, can you help me get this data? Can you do stuff?" But they're kind of trapped within this structure, and that it's
Yeah.
not gonna go away. And for them, I feel like the other way they should look at it is that when you're an employee, it means you also can collectively bargain. It means you can collectively organize. You could push back. And the pushback isn't to get rid of it. The pushback is to say, please let us sit at the design table. You've
Yes.
designed this without
To
us.
adapt it. Yeah.
Going forward, we should be at the design table. And I think that that's kind of what a lot of what I try and encourage physicians to do is to push to be at the design table, not to let any design of any system to be without their input. That's
Yeah.
sort of the first part, and not to necessarily trust their chief medical officer will carry forward their thinking. And
Yes.
patients, actually, the thing I tell patients to do is there is no one place that has all of your data. In fact, you're sort of to put it all together is really quite difficult, right? You have to send in like permission forms. You have to send in sort of like access forms. You have to figure out every single place that you were seen, every televisit you ever had, how any information is stored. So one thing I do tell patients to do is or just all of us really, because we're all patients, is
Yeah.
start collecting your data. Just start collecting it, start putting it, even if you have to put it in a cardboard box, put it in a cardboard box, because at this point in time, you can't
Oh,
actually assemble it. Now, there are new tools, new personal health records and things that are coming out, which are very
oh,
exciting and they may actually help. But in the meantime, you still have to go gather your information. So just start
yeah.
doing it. I think that because only your information, including whatever you write down and whatever you record on an Apple Watch or on a Fitbit, is your data. And not
Yeah.
only that, it may also be one of the only places where you may be the only place where all of the data about you can actually be
Exists.
centralized. Yeah. So that's a little bit of what I push around and try and get
Yeah.
people to realize they actually have a little more agency than they think. The physicians should be pushing hard to be designing if they can, and the patient should be, or just all of us should be trying to amass our records. But the
Yeah.
independent physicians, which is one small sliver of the you, physician population, they still can make independent decisions, and they are making
Okay.
unusual decisions, but they are not. And unfortunately, they're also stuck with a lot of mediocre products to choose from.
Is that who you felt that you were targeting mostly with your book? The independent physicians, so that you can potentially help them make changes and have an impact?
I was really trying to ensure that everyone understood the sort of the consequences of what had happened and sort of
Yeah.
to recognize that going forward. And I was actually trying to get physicians and just everyone in general to be more aware, but particularly physicians and not necessarily only in independent, to start using AI on their side, to start thinking about the fact that they could also be coding, they could also be designing, that they could actually not have to
Yeah.
wait for somebody in engineering to do it. um, but what was fascinating was when I was out speaking with a lot of these physicians, I discovered that there were a number of them who had already gone back to paper, which was really fascinating. Right? That the ultimate opt out of
Yeah.
every like
Yeah.
system, a very small percentage, but nonetheless,
Interesting.
um, definitely exists.
That
And
would be me.
these were physicians who actually didn't take insurance, so in many respects, they didn't have to use an EHR to begin with, and
Uh,
second of all, they also found that of the different products they had, they weren't always happy with them,
yeah.
and the argument for using paper was, and I thought this was the most interesting argument that one of them said, or a reason, not argument, but reason they said, is that when they write something down on a piece of paper and they slide it into that manila folder, when they come back a day or whatever, a week later, and open it back up, that piece of paper will still be there and it will have
Yeah.
been corrupted by a series of
Yeah. It'll look exactly the same.
look exactly the same. And, like, this should be,
That's
like, one of those
amazing.
design concepts that an electronic health record, company should be thinking about,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that they have no incentive to change. These people are gonna be using your system no matter what. So this is what I
Yes.
by there is an opportunity for some disruption to happen, but you won't know that if you don't realize how do you explain systemic risk? This is the
Yeah.
problem, it's in the system.
Yeah. Yeah. When you've been doing all these book events, and I know like you've been to Barnes and Noble, you've won an award already. Tell me how they've been going. Like, how has your book been received overall?
Overall, the book has been well received, and I've been really pleased by it. I have met so many wonderful people. I mean, people have come up to me and talked with me about their own experiences. I've watched a lot of head nodding in a lot of these discussions where people recognize what I'm talking
Yeah,
about. Um,
light bulb
Light
moments.
bulb moments, or like, "Oh, yes, I lived through that," and, "Oh, yes,
Yeah,
I remember that," and, "Oh, I said that." I think there
yeah.
was one where, couple weeks ago, I was speaking, at Bloomberg, and there was this young man who was waiting at the door when I came out, and he after the talk, and he said, "You know, my father is a pediatrician, and he has been complaining about what you just said up there for the longest time, and I didn't believe him, and I didn't
Oh,
understand it. And now, because of kind of what you said, now it all makes sense that, he
oh,
was feeling the effects of being caught in a system. And you've just described why this was a risk.
oh.
Which was really, that was like, that meant a lot to me that
I
someone
was
was
going to
saying,
say, yeah.
you
I bet you
know,
were pleased to hear that for sure.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of
Yeah.
things like that where people are reading and they're like, "Wow, I didn't realize, and I didn't understand that this
Yeah.
separated us from this," or "No wonder it's been so difficult for me to get data, and no
Yeah.
wonder it's been so difficult for me to do research." I have found that really heartwarming because that tells me that if
Yeah.
you know it, then you'll be that much more aware when the next tool comes
Exactly.
around to push back a little bit and be like, "Wait a second, does it need to be this way?"
Yeah. What's the future plans for the book? I mean, I know you're still doing your book events, but anything coming up that we should know about?
Well, I mean, I am still out there doing a number of talks. I'm still
Yeah.
having a few more book events through the spring. I get the opportunity to be with Barrington James
Yeah.
at ISPOR in mid-May, also promoting the book, so that will be really exciting. Thank you.
That's
Um,
right. Thank you.
no, absolutely. I'm so excited. And then I will have a few more events later this fall. I think what
Okay.
I'm really hoping for is that the book becomes um, more widely read as a foundational book, that it's viewed as like, if you're going to go into health IT, if you're going into AI and on the health
Yeah.
IT, that this is one of those foundational books that you read, just so
Yeah.
you can understand the historical legacy, like basically the
Yeah.
history of where we got to here. What does that mean for
Mhm.
AI? And then sort of
Mhm.
some of the
Where
concepts
we are now.
responsible AI mean. I just think it's
Yeah.
like the start point. And I'm hoping that it'll change the conversation in that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it will. I have no doubt. Do you think you'll write another?
The writing the first one was painful enough. I'm not sure. I think I probably need a little time away from it.
I was going to say, you're always very busy anyway, and I know you have family. I don't know how you fit it in. I really don't.
But this one, I felt really compelled to write it, but I won't stop writing. One of the things that I think this has at least allowed me to do is begin to start to create a voice
Yeah.
in thinking about these issues. And so whether I continue to write on LinkedIn posts or whether I start to write more in sort of in blogs or guest essays, I think I'll continue to write, but I'm not sure I necessarily write a second book, at least not at this moment.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Anything else you want me to ask you, Ing, do you think?
No, I think that was pretty good. I don't know if you have any um
Um,
if you want to talk about process, if you want to talk about anything else. Release.
actually, yeah, let's just because more for my curiosity, actually. So let's ask about process. Um, okay, so when you first thought, I really need to get all this down on paper, and then you thought to write the book, how on earth do you even start?
It's a great question. It was honestly, I probably went in naively. I will honestly say that. I thought I could put this together in just a few months and it ended up being 18 months and several rewrites, I should say. One
Uh,
of the hardest things was I had a lot of stories, and so in the very beginning, I put down a lot of stories. I just started writing stories, and I worked. I started to try and organize them a little bit by themes, right? And I had
That's a good idea.
but the problem was that the first time I ended up writing it, it didn't quite work. Like, I think I put a lot of jargon. It's easy to do that. You get inside and you do what we would call sort of inside baseball, where you start using only the terms that only the people inside would understand. And then when I went back and read it, I thought to myself, wait a second, no one's going to know what these acronyms mean, and no one's going to know what this means. But the process of writing that first draft got me realizing that I needed to figure out who my audience was. So I ended up writing a first draft without actually even knowing who my audience was. That was a mistake, but maybe that was part of the process, right? And so instead of just writing it for people who were in my industry or people who might be in healthcare, I realized I wanted to write this for everyone. I wanted it to be
Yeah.
more of a general audience because this actually affects everyone, which meant I needed to take it back a little bit differently and think about, how would I explain all these concepts? Some of these concepts are a little wonky and they're a little bit complex, and then, they're
Uh-huh.
connected to something in the past. So, how do you put those things together? So, I threw out my first draft and I started again. But this time, what I did was I kind of drew a timeline of like all the different events and just put the events based on the year, and I started writing it, but then it started feeling more like a policy book. Like I was trying to tell you what happened in 1998, what happened in 2003, things like that. And then it just didn't quite work. But I still had all the stories. And then I finally sort of shifted and said, okay, you know what? This is actually my story too. So ultimately, what I did was I grounded it in my own story, of my own professional journey, all the things I saw where I was, and then it anchored it. It gave me both the timeline of being able to intersperse all these events at the same time, while I could also tell you where I was at that moment in time and what I was seeing and what assumptions we were making at that time. And all of a sudden, it started to come together as a book. But by the time I thought I was finished with it, it was 10 long chapters with an intro and a conclusion and a whole bunch of appendices, and then my editor got hold of it, and my editor and I totally, kudos to my editor for this one. She did something amazing. She looked at this book and she's like, "You need to start cutting these chapters." And I said, "What do you mean cutting them?" She's like, "No, I'm splitting them into smaller chapters." And so she went through it with me and literally had me split at certain points. And every time I
Oh,
split, I would sort of have to redo it a little bit. I'd redo the ending, redo the beginning of something else because I just took one chapter and turned it into two chapters, or I turned it into three chapters. So now you need sort of an intro going into it. But by doing so, they were now bite sized pieces. And because of that, I could actually move around certain sections together and lump them. And so, in that respect, I ended up with a book that flowed much faster. Something she had said to me, which I honestly would love to share, is most chapters, if you shorten the chapters, you should shorten chapters to somewhere between 8 and 16 pages. And I remember asking her, "Where's that magic number come from? Like, how do you know that's 8 to 16 pages?" And she says, "No, that's about how much it is." And the reason that it's about 8 to 16 pages for a chapter, if you, especially in nonfiction, is the fact that you want the reader to feel a sense of accomplishment after they read each chapter. Because when you feel a sense of accomplishment, like, "Oh, I just finished that chapter," then the next chapter doesn't feel so daunting. Then you go to the next chapter, and before you
yeah,
know it, you've way through the book.
working through it.
Yeah, it's like a pacing thing, kinda like the way the movies
Yeah,
do it, right? You've
yeah.
all paced the game for them by shortening these chapters, and once I did that, I was able to create a book that, is really quite readable. Most of the readers tell me that it's not hard to get through, that it's actually very easy to get through, and they were actually surprised at, considering it was a number of complex topics, and I credit that to my editor because I think the short chapters helped a lot.
How did you find an editor?
I had a writer friend introduce me to an editor. So,
Nice.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that's we went
that's
through it.
good. It's always good to have a recommendation, I guess, when you need an editor randomly. I understand about the chapters thing though. That's really interesting because it's like a TV show, isn't it? I'll
Right.
finish that chapter and I'll just do this chore or I'll get a cup of tea or whatever and then back to it. So yeah, never would have thought of that. Must have been really frustrating at times. You must have had a lot of patience, I'm sure.
Well, there were moments when it was pretty bleak, it felt like, because it was you were I was in
Yeah,
for, like, in the very beginning, I would write maybe I would consider it a success if I sat in front of my computer for an hour and wrote, right?
yeah,
And I would just try and do that, and I wouldn't try and make it too hard on myself, but then I found and then there were days that I would really get into it, and then it'd be multiple hours, right? And I never
yeah,
really planned for them very properly at that time because in the beginning I'd schedule meetings, I'd do these other things, and I'd hit a moment where I was in the groove and I'd have to stop, right? And I could never
yeah,
get into that groove. So then it sort of forced me to sort of lean in and say, okay, you know what? I actually have to put aside time to write. Like I can't just like sneak it in here and there. I actually have to really block off big blocks of time. I may have to actually take days where I don't take any meetings, that I only
wow.
those. And then there are moments when it gets kind of lonely, right? You're talking to yourself the whole time. Some days
Yes,
were great in terms of writing, and
yeah,
other days were not. I wasn't somebody who was ever considered myself a writer, which probably made it a little harder. Like
yeah,
just discipline of writing was something I
yeah,
learned through this process.
yeah. A lot of determination for sure, and like you said, discipline. So yeah,
And at
well
some
done.
point, like I got off my desk, I got to finish it, right?
Yes, you're
Another
going stir crazy. I
exactly.
love that. Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you. Thank you for talking us through everything today. I'm really, like you said, I'm really excited that we're going to have you at ISPOR on our booth. So looking forward to hearing how that goes. Um, I don't think there's anything else. Do you, Ing?
Oh,
For
show the book. Let me grab the book since we're going to edit
Oh,
it.
yes, and you were gonna yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So sorry. Let me come back in.
No, that's all right. Yeah.
This is the book.
Yeah.
It's
I love it. Great
yeah,
title, by the way.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so that's the book. I don't know if it's
Lovely.
looking backwards on the screen, but in any event, yeah. So, but it is
Wonderful.
available in hardback, paperback, and ebooks, and you can buy it at any bookseller. You can literally
Yep.
just order it from anywhere,
Nice.
and you can order it,
Yep.
of course, on Amazon.
Brilliant. And you're going to be signing any at ISPOR?
Will be. I will be there to sign books. I'll have
Lovely.
there. Yeah, I'll bring a whole bunch of books, and it'll be wonderful.
Brilliant. Oh, brilliant. And it's so good because at ISPOR, you have such an amazing network there. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a lot of people coming to see you wanting that signed copy as well. So congratulations. It's
Thank
really
you.
impressive. Very impressive. It's been great talking to you about it today.
Thank you, Pippa. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope and I look forward to meeting everybody at the booth.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome. Great. Think that
Okay.
was okay?
I think so. Kyle,
I
what?
think I was I think I was pulling faces half the time, quite frankly.
Okay.
Okay, and I messed it up in the first place anyway, actually, when I did do that. Um, sure. Okay, I'll give you the nod now. So thanks very much for listening. Just a reminder that Ing is joining us at our ISPOR booth in May. We're booth 337. Look forward to seeing our network there. If we can help in any other way, don't hesitate to contact us. And we're looking forward to seeing everybody at ISPOR.